If y'all would turn your Bibles to Genesis 42. And it's my first time back in Genesis in a little while. Pastor Chief, he took us through Genesis 41 the other week. Did a real good job and saved me one more chapter. So Genesis 42 is where we are. We've all faced times of need in our lives. I mean, to some extent or another. I think it's at these times that we can question God the most, because we're like, all right, what has happened? Where are you? I mean, it's no problem questioning. Anyway, we're now at a time in Jacob's life, in the nation of Israel, well, they're not a nation yet, in the family of Israel, that there's a time of need. And it's in these times that, excuse me, we can question the whereabouts of God the most, I think. But however, as Christians, we have to learn to accept the fact that God is in control of every aspect of our lives. Excuse me. And you've heard that. I beat that horse to death over the last several chapters, I understand. But we still have a hard time registering that when we get in a pinch, when we get in a tight, when our back is against the wall. And when you squeeze something, that's when you see or hear what comes out of it. So if there's an exception to the rule that God's in charge of everything, it is the place in which we do not allow God to operate. If you think of your life as a hallway with doors down both sides, and each room is some part, place, aspect of your life, the door which remains closed to God, He's not in control. He's not allowed in there. That's the stuff we want to hold for ourselves, and we want to control that. And that's where we get into trouble. Now today we're going to see how Jacob, when he's driven by need, turns to Egypt for help. And some people are, oh gosh, you turn to Egypt for help. Later that's an issue. Right now it's very practical and it's not a problem at all. In Jacob's mind, this is the logical thing to do. However, in the grand plan of God, God is already waiting on Jacob. He is sitting there. All this has kind of been set up, as it were. One trick to living a life according to the plan of God is to remember that God is in control. Peace comes from knowing that God is in control when you are out of control. If you've ever, I used to drive a truck, and you want to be in control of those 80,000 pounds rolling down the highway at 70 or 75,000 or 75 miles per hour. No truck is that fast. Mm-hmm. The point is, you want to be in control. I understand that. But there's a point in time when you're not. Like when the left front tire comes off of your 18-wheeler, just before you get into Chattanooga at 70 miles per hour, and it takes you... Normally they say if the front tire comes off an 18-wheeler, it's over. Just go ahead and hope you know Jesus. It jerks you down through the median, up in oncoming traffic, and finally you get it stopped again somehow in the median. Not in control. Trooper comes up and says, man, that was some awesome driving. I'm like, dude, I have clamped down on the wheel and said, God help me 1,000 times. And then it was stopped. I don't know. I'm not in control. You see these deadliest catch or whatever, where they're out there crab fishing out in the North Sea. And you got these guys that have been steering these boats for 20, 30, 40 years, and all of a sudden there are times when they're no longer in control of it. Now the peace comes from knowing, all right, there's nothing I can do here. God is now in control of that. And we have to keep that in our minds. I didn't say, and I know this is not easy to do, but it is something that we must learn to do, to understand that God is in control. And we learn this through repetition. Hence, you've been told this for the last several weekends in a row. If we really meditate on our lives, then we learn, we're able to see God moving. And a lot of times it's in hindsight. I understand it's 2020, or all of a sudden something happens. When something good happens, oh, God's actually moving. Something bad happens, where did He go? But He's still there regardless. But we need to take note of these things so that we can recall them in the future when a need arises. It's just as we've seen, you see it especially in the book of Exodus. We've seen it some throughout Genesis. when something happens, they set up a little altar, just a pile of rocks or a rock. But it's a waymark. It is something to bring their memory back when people see this, future generations see it. Why is there one of those rocks piled up there? Well, that's the time, blah, blah, blah. We have to be able to go back and recall those things, because those are the things that are going to carry you through the next time something happens and you want to freak out. So it allows us to apply faith to our walk. There's also something else I want to point out to you, and that is that when I say that God is in control, it does not mean that we just sit back in cruise control. We still have volition. We still have free will. We still have to act upon what God tells us to do. We still have decisions to make. We are to be guided by the Holy Spirit in that. We have an active part to play in this life. It's not a passive thing at all. So later in the Old Testament, we'll see that Israel is rebuked by God for turning to Egypt for help in time of need. Now, we can't say, well, we went to Egypt once and it was okay, so let's go back again. That's what we tend to do. It worked last time. Doesn't mean it's going to work this time. Each situation is different. We have to consult God in each case, and that requires a relationship, and that's the way He wants it set up. Otherwise, you just go, oh, we're hungry, go to Egypt. Oh, we're thirsty, we go over here. God's not consulted. There's nothing that furthers a relationship. We're just on cruise control. It's automatic. It's a formula. And that's not at all what God wants. So, today we're going to pick up in Genesis 42. Jacob, while living in the land of Canaan, is beginning to feel the effects of the famine that has hit the area of the Middle East, and it's worked its way out. The prophecy that it was coming was not that the famine was specific to Egypt. A lot of people see it that way, but the whole area, which is very arid, even back then, it wasn't as arid as it is now, but even back then was arid, is susceptible to this sort of thing. Logically speaking, Jacob has only one way to turn, and that is to go to Egypt for food. He's heard that there is grain stored there, and he wants to send his boys to buy provisions. Just makes sense, you know. You go to the biggest, richest country, they have the most resources. Egypt is as far as that's concerned, is the America of that day back then. So verse 1 says this. When Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" Because the boys just standing around, duh. We don't have any food. Okay. We don't have to go to the garden. We just sit here and starve. That's guys, you know. And it was from this that the union was started. No, just kidding. And he said, "Indeed, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down to that place and buy for us there, that we may live and not die." You dumb boys. So we open up chapter 2 seeing that Jacob's knowledge of the famine has driven him to go to Egypt for grain and what have you. Now, we're often driven by need. You know, we don't have any milk. Got to go to the store and get it. You're out of dog food. You're out of bread. That was, you know, I can remember if there's one trip my father has made a gazillion times, it's going from milk and bread to the store. He's over here right now. I'm sure he'll testify to that. Oh, by the way, my mother just had a birthday. She's 29. And my wife's 29. Sure. Most women, a lot of the women in here are 29. No lady in here is over 29. But we're often driven by need. And this need is often, things we don't enjoy. You know, the need of fulfilling the need. Therefore, we tend to look at a serious or a dire need as something of a curse or a setback. However, many times, for the Christian, the follower of God, it's only a way or a mechanism whereby God is using something, some circumstance or what have you, to steer us onto a different path. And in this case, God uses the need that has been produced by the famine in order that He might reunite Jacob and his family and Joseph. So, famine is certainly not a good thing. I don't think anybody would say that it was. Many would argue that there were certainly better ways to have gotten the family back together. I mean, you could have called them on Facebook, I'm sure, and, you know, do whatever you do on there and just get everybody together. But God is omniscient. which means all-knowing. He knows all things, and in His divine providence, He's chosen this method of getting the family together because it's more than just a family reunion. This happens to go all the way to Jesus and the building of a nation here. So we have to remember that in God's grand scheme of things, this is not just a family reunion. We see them in the microcosm. We say, oh, family reunion just got, no. There's a much bigger plan. And I really think if somehow we could kind of step back and see our potential parts in God's larger plan, we would be motivated to get off wherever we're sitting and get active. But what at the present time here, God needs to move the entire clan of Jacob into Egypt so that they can receive what will amount to a 400-year degree college education, as it were. The family has to become a nation. All right, they're just a family. They're just an extended family. They're just a bunch of farmers out in the middle of nowhere right now. But they have to become a nation, and not just any nation, not just a nation among nations. The family has to become the nation that God is going to use to minister to the entire world. Now that takes more than a couple of seminars on the weekend. It takes a few lessons from the school of HK, Hard Knocks. All right, so they're going to be prepared. They're going to be given everything they need when they leave Egypt, to the overhead capital, if you will, to start the nation. So therefore, he has to bring what is now just a Bedouin family to the most advanced civilizations of its day, or at least in that region, in order that they learn how to be a nation. And that's going to take centuries. But it's necessary to complete God's greater plan. We also need to note that once Jacob found out there was grain in Egypt, he saw that his boys had a strange look on their faces. Because now for some 21 years, that's the timeline we're dealing with here, these men had lived with the fact that they had sold their little brother into slavery. And he went down to the Egyptian slave markets. And whether he stayed there or was sold off into some other, maybe African or Mediterranean nation, I don't know. But, I mean, we know what happened, but he could have been sold anywhere. So there's actually a lot of trepidation about them going back there. Oops, we got to go there? Where we sent our little brat brother? So they're obviously worried about that. Their dumbfounded look, though, seems to be interpreted by Jacob as them just standing around not knowing what to do, which is typical of guys, because their wives aren't there in the field to tell them what to do. So therefore he asked, why are y'all just standing around? Despite the fact here that they did not want to go to Egypt, they agreed for the sake of the family and the flock. So go back to verse 3. It says, so Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, lest some calamity befall him. And the sons of Israel, Jacob, same thing, went to buy grain among those who journeyed, for the famine was in the land of Canaan among those who journeyed. Now that's important. And I'll get to that in a second, just as a backup detail. In verse 4, we see here that he did not send Benjamin. He still seems to be pessimistic. He doesn't. Last time he sent the youngest brother off with this bunch, he didn't come back. So he's not going to send his baby boy out with this bunch again. You can already see that these boys are a little thick. They're not the sharpest tools in the shed. There aren't too many Rhodes Scholars amongst this bunch. You understand? Which I don't know how much being a Rhodes Scholar means anyway, because Bill Clinton was one. But the point is, he's not going to lose his baby boy here. We also see in verse 5 that it wasn't only Jacob's family that was going to Egypt for food. It says that they were among those who journeyed, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. So Canaanites in general are heading down there. So they're in the middle of this big convoy, all right, headed to Egypt. This is not just Jacob's family. People are coming from all over the place to buy this grain. Buy it. And that's important. Because back in the early 90s, I was on a radio show. I had my own radio show. It was a call-in show. And this was back during the years of Clinton. And I finally asked, I said, someone give me a biblical reason to vote at that, this I'll probably get shot, but to vote for the party that is now in power. I'm not mentioning the name of that party. It was Bill Clinton's party. I said, somebody give me a biblical reason for doing that. And of course, I knew what the answer was going to be. I get the phone blows off the wall. Just ding, ding, ding. Because they help people, because they help people, because they help people, because they help people. And Bobby's supposed to help people. They help people, help people. I said, okay. And and here's big government intervention. Look what Joseph did in Egypt. And I said, I was waiting for you to come to that. So I said, I finally just cut the phones off because there wasn't but one answer, and I knew what the answer was going to be. They help people, they help people, they help people. Okay. We're supposed to help people, yes. But here's the difference. We as individuals are supposed to help people. You don't see the government intervening. Well, look what Joseph did in Egypt. Yes, let me tell you what he did for Egypt. He confiscated grain for 7 years, and then when the famine came, he sold it back to everyone, including the citizens. Is that the example you want? The only welfare system that Israel ever had when God set up a country was the gleanings of the field. Plant a little extra, leave it there on the outside, and guess what? You got to come get it. We don't mail it to you. So it's a lot different. But anyway, I digress. Let's go back. So it wasn't only Jacob's family that is moving down in here. There's people from all over the place. And it only makes sense because they have prepared for it. So you see that the family had extended into we had people from all over Canaan, most like the surrounding areas, possibly as far as Assyria and Babylon are now moving in, trying to get food. I don't know the exact extent of the famine. Verse 6, now Joseph was governor over the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land, did not give it away. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. Then he said to them, where do you come from? And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Then Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them and said to them, you are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said to him, no, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all one man's sons. We are honest men, the same honest men that sold you into slavery and lied to our father. Your servants are not spies. But he said to them, no, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said, your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more, as far as we know. But Joseph said to them, it is as I spoke to you, saying, you are spies. Now, Joseph sees them, recognizes them. They don't remember him. Now, we'll see later, he's not speaking to them in Hebrew. He's speaking through an interpreter because he doesn't want them to know. So when they're conferring amongst themselves, he understands what they're saying. So they're like, oh, what are we going to do? What about this? And he hears them, and he's sitting there acting like he doesn't know what they're saying. So he's sitting here, and he remembers this dream. They're going to bow down to me. And he's like, I got them now. Because they're brothers. And that's what you do, is you torture your other brothers. And if you're a guy, you know what that means. There are all sorts of things that we're not going to talk about here you can do to torture your brother. But upon their arrival, Joseph recognizes them. He realized he was disliked some by his older brothers. He was always seen as daddy's favorite. He was special. He got the coat. They used to make a joke. I remember they used to have these jokes. I think it was Saturday Night Live. Jimmy Carter or Billy Carter was on there. And the joke was that Jimmy Carter always got the toy and Billy got the box that it came in. And that was just, I think that was Saturday Night Live. But it was just, Billy was just the misfit of the bunch. Sometimes I think he'd have done a better job than his brother as president. But anyway, upon telling going back in time here, upon telling these dreams to his brothers, they mocked him, and eventually this led to their throwing him into the cistern, plotting to kill him, eventually selling him into slavery. I continually emphasize this to you so that you are aware of all the bad things that have happened to Joseph. But at the same time, we have to realize that God was working behind the scenes in order that Joseph may be where he is right now in chapter 2. He is enjoying it, maybe a little too much. But, I can't necessarily fault him there. 21 years have passed. 21 years have passed since Joseph was sold into slavery, and now he's the second in command of Egypt. 21 years is a long time to have to wait to reach your calling. 21 years is a long time to have to wait to see your brothers bow down to you. It's a long time to wait for all in which you have labored to come to fruition, whatever that might be. However, looking at it from God's standpoint, our lives are but a vapor. In God's economy, we're just seen as a blip on the timeline of all humanity. It can be said that Joseph has paid his dues and now he's in the place which he needs to be in order that God's plan is to be carried out. To take advantage, so, we need to take advantage of what time we have. Joseph begins here by speaking harshly to his brothers, accusing them of being spies, and they're like, well, I don't know. Imagine going to a foreign country, having an interpreter. There is the number 2 man in the country, and he accuses you of being a spy. This, if Stalin's in charge, you're just a dead man. You got to understand. Just put yourself in their shoes for a minute. We just came down here to buy some groceries, dude, and now we're in the White House, and they're telling us we're spies. We could be in Abu Ghraib next week. We don't know what to do about this. I know he doesn't really believe they're spies. I think he just wants to have some fun with them and be harsh to them. Of course, they attempt to explain their plight and to prove that we're just ordinary people. We're just the sons of one guy, a farmer, out in the middle of nowhere. And even one of us in here, one of us there, we've had a hard life. Therefore, Joseph devises a way to test their sincerity. And we see that in verse 15. It says, in this manner you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you, and let him bring your brother, and you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be tested to see whether there is any truth in you. Or else, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. So he put them all together in prison 3 days. Then Joseph, you can imagine that. They're all huddled around the bunk. What are we going to do? Then Joseph said to them on the 3rd day, do this and live, for I fear God, Yahweh there. Now that is that's a link there, because the Egyptians worship a plethora of gods. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house, but you go and carry grain for the famine of your houses, and bring your youngest brother to me. So your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so. So Joseph here devises this test. In my opinion, he's doing a couple different things here. For one, I think he really wants to see his little brother. For another, I think he is teaching them a lesson about integrity. He's also, I think, showing them who's boss. Which ones, as I said, if you got a brother, that just comes with the territory. Mine are grown now, and they still have that thing going about who's boss. When the truth comes out in his dream, when the truth comes out, his dreams will be shown to be true. That is, if they're going to bow to him. I also believe that Joseph is torn here because part of him wants to hug his brothers because he loves them. The other part of Joseph wishes to assert his authority in order that they would respect him and what he's become. And all of us are torn like this at times. Joseph is human just like us. He's a great guy and he follows God, but he's not walking around with a halo. Just because he's a main character in the Bible does not mean that he's immune to pride or anything else. Look at King David. Verse 21, so then they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we were not here. Therefore this distress has come upon us. And they're talking about Joseph. When they throw him down, they sell him. And Reuben answered them, saying, didn't I tell you? I told y'all. Did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy, and you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. This is all y'all's fault. All y'all's fault. Not just y'all's, all y'all's fault. But they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. And he turned himself away from them and wept. Then he returned to them again at all, and talked with them. And he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. So getting back to this conversation, we see the brothers speaking to each other in Hebrew, about concerning selling Joseph into slavery. And in their mind, there's this tit for tat theology, and that still runs rampant today. You do something bad, God hits you with lightning, or something slightly less severe. And then if I do something good, well, tomorrow I will be blessed with a check from Publishers Clearinghouse. That is the type of tit for tat theology we think about. Oh gosh, my car died. All right, okay, let me think. I did scream at that person who cut me off the other day. That's why God is punishing my car. He put a car demon in now it won't run. No, that's not the case. Your problem probably is that you've got a General Motors car and it's just not any good. But in their minds, they're now being punished for selling their brother into slavery, which is maybe a little bit from Joseph, but it's not God. God has not done this to them because of what they did. This is actually, God. They've acted, and God has used it. Now you can argue all day long about whether God made them do that. God knew what was going to happen from the beginning. I don't think God made them sell their brother there, but God knew what was going to play out. Okay, I can roll with that. That's what Fabian says. When we go out to pray, just roll with me, dog. Dog. Aretha Franklin's father was a pastor, and he said, if you call a man, it used to, now it's different. Now it's dog is, I guess, a term of affection or endearment. Back then, he said, this is back in the 60s, he said, if you call a man a dog, he wants to fight. If you call him a big dog, he'll love you. That's just the way it works. Anyway, during all of this, these guys don't know that Joseph understands them. I told you that he's speaking through them in an interpreter, but he's privy to all that they're saying. Look at verse 25. So then Joseph gave a command to fill their sacks with grain, to restore every man's money to his sack, and to give them provisions for the journey. Thus he did for them. So they loaded their donkeys with the grain and departed from there. So you understand what he's done. They're not buying 50 pounds of corn. All right? They've got an extended family. They've got livestock to feed. So, they didn't just throw something in the back of a Pinto. This is truckloads of stuff. I mean, they've got to pack mules, for days. This is hundreds or thousands of pounds of grain they need to stay alive. You don't know how long this is going to happen. So however much money they had, they go down there to buy it. But as Joseph orders, look, here, stick their money back in the sacks of grain, give them some food and water for the return trip home. And then the guys leave, thinking, all right, all we got to do is manage. We got to find somebody's little kid or their brother and at least try to figure out or trick this guy into thinking he's our little brother, because they really don't think their father's going to turn loose of him. So we see Joseph's compassion here. It comes back to the forefront because he orders his men to do this. So therefore, these men are getting their grain for free. All right? But they're the only ones in their kin. All right? So that would be collusion or something nowadays. That would be investigated by someone. But I see this as Joseph blessing the father whom he loves. Some people would say this is simply not fair. Get over it. Life is not fair. And it never will be. Okay? We talked about that last week. Joseph is using his position in order to bless one family while not doing it the same for every other family. Right. It happens all the time. It will continue to happen until Jesus comes. That's just the way it is. So don't come to me whining about it, because if you want a job at the XYZ widget company and you happen to know someone that works there, hey, put in a good word for me. And you'll buy them dinners. You'll schmooze them. You will. Why? Hoping they'll help you out. That's not fair. So I don't hear about fair. All right? I don't hear about it. Life is not fair. And it won't be. All right? It's just not. As we used to say at the dirt track, you run what you brung. That means whatever you got, you go with it. Do the best you can. So anyway, we would do well to rejoice when someone is blessed in this way. But what do we do? Oh, look at them. They got this. Is that the way Jesus will look at it? Is that the way we should look at it? Oh, praise the Lord. They've been blessed. We should be happy when they're blessed. Yeah, but they got blessed more than me. And that goes back to the dirt track. It's okay to cheat as long as you weren't winning consistently. As long as you weren't cheating more than the other guys. Because everybody cheated a little bit. But if you started winning, then they want to know how you were winning and how you were doing to cheat. And if they couldn't do it also, then they would tell on you. Put a claim on your engine, on your car. So it's okay to cheat as long as you weren't getting blessed or winning more than anyone else. That's the way our minds work. So we would do well to rejoice when someone's blessed in this way. And God was blessing them. And do you understand what I'm saying? Because we should be known as the ones, we should not be known as the ones who are always complaining and crying about things. It is not good for God's people to come off as the victim. It's just not good. It's just not good, especially if you're always the victim. Those Eeyore people? You look around, whatever you see, our daddy owns this. So don't claim to be the victim. All right? So, when we don't get a promotion, it's because for whatever reason God didn't have us to have that promotion at that time. Someone else got it over you. Get over it. Still be the best employee you can. Chances are that person might blow it and you get their slot. I don't know. But the point is, it makes us look like a child when we're laying on the floor, kicking and screaming and turning in circles because we didn't get what we want. It does not make us look like Jesus Christ. There. At any rate, however you want to see it, Joseph has blessed his family and given them back the money that they brought with them. They're not going to find it till later. Look at verse 27. But as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey feed at the encampment, he saw his money, and there it was in the mouth of his sack. So he said to his brothers, "My money has been restored, and there it is in my sack." Then their hearts failed them, because they got free food. But their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, "What is this that God has done to us?" Okay. So now they've been blessed with free food, got all their money back, and it's God's fault too. They're being cursed still by having free food, provision, and all their money given back to them. But I understand this created a panic. And for all they know, the Egyptian soldiers are coming after them because somebody figured out they've got X amount of tons of grain or whatever, and we're short that much money. Who got it? These guys. And so they're freaking out. I can understand that a little bit. But to go so far to say God cursed us out of, but that's what their tit for tat theology gets them. Quid pro quo, kind of. And the B portion of verse 28, we saw that like I said, is the blessing of the money. They're seeing it as a curse. And so they rightly attribute the money to God, but they don't see the blessing for what it really is. So now, even when they're being blessed, they've misinterpreted it. Do you see how some people's minds just run wild? And it almost always goes off track. I mean, it goes off the rails quickly, and it's almost like you can't bless some people. You just can't. They don't know how to take it. They don't know how to receive it. And that's a whole nother level of problem. But the point here is, in their case, it's based on their theology and their guilty conscience. So, I want to ask us right quick, how many of us have done the same thing? How many of us have been blessed and seen it as a curse? How many of us have seen our blessings as an inconvenience? God's blessed me. It's causing me a lot of stress in my life. I just back in social media and forget about the world. How many of us have seen an opportunity to minister to someone else as an inconvenience? I'll be honest with you. I can admit to that. You're in the middle of studying. You're in the zone, man. It's coming, and I'll say, "Ring, Pastor Ev, I got a hangnail. Would you pray for me and drive over here and anoint it with oil?" And major calamity. I mean, and I go, okay. But I really should not. Well, maybe a hangnail, okay, but I shouldn't see it that way. But if our hearts and our minds are daily set towards seeking God's face and His will for our lives, and by that, I don't mean just the big picture, but that we seek Him for the daily things also. I mean, what's the Lord's prayer is, give us this day our daily bread. Not, Lord, give us this day 401 retirement, pension for the future. I don't have to worry about any financial things again. And I hope if you have that, I hope you do. It's awesome. But the deal is, the little things daily is the idea there. It's easy for us to say that we're children of God and that He has a plan for our lives, but we have to understand that our life is made up of subsequent days that are strung together. Oh, God has a plan for my life, and we see it in the big picture. Okay, but that's made up of day after day after day. Our life is the big picture, whereas the daily things are the details. Now, how many of us get up in the morning with our day already planned, and we don't consult God as to what He would have us do on that particular day? Most of us. I mean, you got to get up. First thing you got to do, coffee. That's in the Bible. You got to get your coffee, whatever, shower, you'll put on your war paint and comb your hair, and hopefully you brush your teeth and use deodorant and all that. And get up and you got to go to work, and you know what, most of the time you know about what you got to do at work that day. And, we go and we get into that. And then all of a sudden someone comes across our path. And then there's an opportunity to minister, but it wasn't in our plan. I wasn't supposed to have to deal with this guy today. I was supposed to go and sell this and make a lot of money. I was not supposed to have that. This is a hindrance. No, it is an opportunity to minister. And had we consulted God about our calendar that morning, He might have told us, or at least given a hint, that you need to carve out some time in your day because I'm going to send someone across your path. And those are the little things that lump together to make up the bigger picture, and we need to be aware of that. Look at verse 29. Then they went to Jacob, their father, in the land of Canaan, and told him all that had happened to them, saying, the man who is Lord of the land spoke roughly to us all, and took us for spies. And see, they all got a trophy growing up, so they can't handle this. He spoke roughly to us, Daddy, and took us for spies of the country. But we said to him, we are honest men. We are not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father this day in the land of Canaan. And you think, do they really talk like this and rehash the exact same thing over again? Yes, they do. That's just the way Hebrews write. If you ever watched, going to Israel and had two Jews watch them in a conversation, it's long and drawn out and it's very animated. And they are best of buddies, but they usually think they're about to come to blows. It's just the way they do things. So yeah, they're going over every single detail. Most guys are like, okay, just cut to the chase. All right, you got the food, you come back, you want your brother. I'm good. We said that in one run-on sentence. No need to sit here all day and hash this out. Then the man, the Lord of the country, verse 33, said to us, by this I will know you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me. Take food for the famine of your households and be gone. And bring your youngest brother to me. So I shall know that you are not spies, but that you are honest men. I will grant your brother to you, and you may trade in the land. Then it happened as they emptied their sacks. Now, one brother has found his money. Now look at this. Surprisingly, each man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. So in verses 29 through 35, we now have a panicked group of men going home to their father to recount their story. They are afraid of being pursued by the Egyptians and being accused of stealing. So when they get home, they got to tell their dad the entire story. They also had to explain why they're short a brother again. And not only that we got to take the baby back with us. And dad's probably still, they live longer. So he's still spry. He's probably still able to take all of them. All right. So the last thing Jacob wanted was to lose another son. They've got to explain all this. And apparently, they're unloading the sacks of grain, all this, and this takes time. But as they do this, lo and behold, there's all their money. And then verse 35 ends with the statement that they were all afraid. And now Jacob also fears, not only is he afraid of being called a thief and maybe hunted down by the Egyptian army, possibly in his mind, but he's also afraid that he's afraid for the life of his son Simeon. And in his mind, Pharaoh's going to discover that his sons, have stolen grain, and in return, he's got collateral. Simeon is in jail. Look at verse 36. And Jacob, their father, said to them, "You have bereaved me." Now that's a very nice word. I'm sure it didn't come off that way, especially in Hebrew. Joseph is no more. Simeon is no more. And you want to take Benjamin. All these things are against me. Then Reuben spoke to his father, saying, "Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you." But he said, this being Jacob, "My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If any calamity should befall him along the way in which you go, then you would bring down my gray hair with sorrow to the grave." Meaning this would kill me. That's essentially what he's saying. Jacob's now at an all-time low. Joseph's gone. Simeon's gone. In order to get him back, they're going to have to return with Benjamin. Yet they're sitting here on tons of stolen grain, and they've got to go right into the king's house there. And not only has he lost 2 boys, but you got to understand, in that culture, even 100 years ago, boys were worth some money on a farm. That's free labor. That's the way it works. And if you had a daughter, she's going to marry a guy that can now live on the farm and be free labor. All right? So he's lost a lot of wealth. The more boys you had, the richer you were seen to be. So he's seeing his wealth diminish, but it's in the worst way possible. It's not just a stock market crash. He's losing sons here. So and then verse 37, Reuben steps up and says, "You can kill my 2 boys." I'm sure his kids are standing. They're gone. Daddy would say he pulled a Hank Snow. They're long gone. "Put him in my hands and I will bring him back." However, we need to understand here that Jacob has already prophesied over Reuben. You may reclaim this. And what did he say about Reuben? He's as unstable as water. You can't rely on this guy. He could flake out. Water takes the path of least resistance. So when it comes down to brass tacks of it, he's as worthless as a screen door on a submarine. He's no good. Therefore, Jacob doesn't have a whole lot of confidence in Reuben. And once again, Reuben has a reputation of not being reliable, as do the rest of the boys at this time. Jacob has a motley crew here. I mean, they're just not that sharp. But we've got to be careful of our everyday actions, because it is these actions and how they are perceived that make up what is known as our reputation. Our reputation is our testimony. It is our witness. And when we're seen as flaky, not following through, not showing up when we say we're going to, our yea not being a yea, our nay being a nay. When you say, that's what Jesus is talking about. If you say yes, let it be yes. Say no, let it be no. At the end of the day, Daddy told me this. He said, all you've got, son, at the end of the day is your name. Let it be a yea. If you say yes, they ought to be able to take it to the bank. If you say no, they ought to be able to take it to the bank. So our word is our bond. At any rate, Jacob determines that Benjamin will not go back to Egypt. He's written Simeon off as dead in order to save the life of his youngest son. Because if something were to happen during the trip, this would bring down his gray hair, would just kill him. Now, today we read about people who are driven by need, seen from just the natural eye, natural circumstances. All these things are nothing but toil and tribulation and hardship. They're circumstances. They are circumstances that have made life hard. And they just seem to keep compounding. And it seems as if they've driven Jacob almost into a depression. The sons are panicked. There seems to have been a great loss and even a perceived threat of God being against them. That's not a good place to be, even though it's wrong. What is actually happening, though, is that this is all God's plan. They have totally misread, totally misconstrued every single aspect of what's happening in their lives now, because I'm here to tell you, if you try to live your life reading all the tea leaves of everything that happens, you will be miserable. Because you're not going to figure it all out. Oh, this happened, this happened, this is a good one, this is a bad, this is good, this is a bad one, bad, uh-oh. You will go crazy. The need that drove Jacob's family to Egypt in search of food was a mechanism in which God employed to reunite the family. The selling of Joseph into slavery 22 decades ago was a secret that his brothers had hidden the entire time, was a mechanism to get Joseph down to Egypt. And not only does it provide food for them during this famine, it is the invitation they need to come down there, take the best real estate in the land of Egypt, the Nile Delta, the eastern Nile Delta, Goshen, the best land in Egypt they get, and stay there for 215 years. They live freely. The last 215 they're slaves, but that is still part of God's plan in order that they have everything they need when they leave Egypt so that they are capable of building a nation. So Joseph is now bringing his family to Egypt, and his family, of course, will stay there for altogether 430 years. The family entered Egypt as a family of just 75 people. They left Egypt as a nation, and they will leave Egypt with the wealth of the Egyptians. Every time Israel as a nation decides to leave, guess what? People pay them to go. And they're nice, not that they're a nuisance. Just get out of here, please. We've had enough. Daily, we run into snags, inconveniences, and bothersome distractions that could very well be God trying to get our attention and move us into a certain place. So instead of sighing, throwing up our hands, fussing and fighting, we need to take a step back and see what God may be trying to do in our lives. This is where you need to employ the Bruce Lee philosophy. When they expand, I contract. When they contract, I expand, which simply means he rolls with the punches. If you can go with the flow, roll with the punches. I know some of you people have to have everything ordered and everything is in its little box. I'm not that person. I'm very close to someone who is. But I understand, and I'm the total opposite. I'm like, okay, whatever. We'll just do something else. What are we going to do? I don't know. Figure it out. I'm not going to stress about it. And that's good because they are very efficient. But the problem happens when somebody throws a curveball, the whole thing comes down. You don't want that. That is, in my mind, as someone who is slightly disorganized, I couldn't live my life that way. I just can't do it. So when this happens, when these things happen and all of a sudden we feel stopped, our momentum of the day, we're getting by, I made the phone calls, I'm doing this, sold this, made some money, did this, and all of a sudden there's that person that you want to run from and they show up. I got a question. Think about it this way. What is God trying to do today? So when this happens, what we see is an inconvenience, a bump in the road. I want you to just ask God what He wants you to do. That's simple. And then listen and act upon it. Because there are always going to be things, and if, like I said, you can sit there and try to interpret it, and you can misinterpret it, and you can try to figure out, am I in or am I out? Am I good with God today or what? You're going to go crazy. Are you saved? Yes. All right. Then roll with it, dog. Keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. And this is good or bad. God has placed it here. Now, what am I going to do with it? Let me ask Him. What does He want me to do with it? Good or bad? Is it an opportunity or a hindrance? If you see everything in your life as a hindrance, you know what that means? You are focused on your own little world. And it's like, God, get all these people out of my way so I can get what I want. That's not the mindset you're supposed to have. As God's people, it's more like a stroll. God wants you to stay busy now. I didn't mean like just one of those. You've seen those people, it takes them 30 minutes to walk across the street in front of you? Not those guys. But it's a stroll, and all right, this has come up. All right, we deal with it. God, what would you have us do? All right, is it an opportunity or an inconvenience? How do you see it? Would y'all bow your heads, please? Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, life is complicated. There are many people in and out of it, many circumstances in and out of it, just constant. It's just something all the time. But how are we going to view it? And this is not the power of positive thinking or anything like that, Lord. This is the Christian worldview that, Lord, we are just part of a larger wheel. We are just one spoke on a large wheel. We are just playing a minor part in the plan of plans of all ages. Lord, and we're either playing it according to your will or we're not playing it at all. And so, Father, I ask that we would see it this way, Lord, that we would have the peace that knowing whatever is placed in front of us, you've placed it there or you've allowed it, and that you won't put on us more than we can bear. And if it seems that we can't bear it, well, it's obviously because we have not yielded to you, and there's something we're trying to fight in this. And Lord, I understand none of this is easy to do, but it is what must be done, and it is the way it must be seen. So, Father, I just pray that we could look at our lives and the circumstances in which we find ourselves through these glasses. They're not rose-colored, but they are a biblical view of our lives, Father. And, Lord, I would just pray that we're able then to see every inconvenience, hindrance, those things as we used to see them, Lord, we now see them as an opportunity. So, Father, I ask you to just bless us with this. And that by next week we will have seen some of those opportunities. And we'll have a new lease on life and a new view as to what life is really about. For that, Father, we thank you. And I just ask that you would change our hearts in this way, Father. Thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ, His grace and His mercy, Lord, that He is so freely given to us. And, Father, as the recipients of that, Father, I just pray that we would serve you and walk in your will, Father. In Jesus' name I pray.